Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Workplace Wanderer Lessons from the Experts. I am Blake Cohen. I am your host, and I am a leadership expert and explorer. And I'm here on this podcast to discuss all things workplace. This is my favorite thing to do. Each week, I get to record an episode with a new individual, people that I know, people that I'm getting to know. And there's always just like little nuggets of information that comes out that just I love, and I've just added to my toolbox every time. So selfishly, this podcast is a bit for me. I'm trying to become a better practitioner in the organizational psychology and development space. So all these little nuggets that I get from the guest, I'm just trying to learn from them. And the hope is that you guys will be able to learn from them too. This week, I have a guest on that I'm very excited, somebody that our paths have crossed many times, somebody that I really look up to and I respect a lot. And today we're going to be discussing trauma within organizations and leadership. And our guest is Essen Pennarly. Hi,
Hi,
Essen.
Blake. I'm so excited to be on. Thank you I'm humbled that you asked me to be on. I'm Essen Pennarly. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, mastered certified addiction professional, owner of Eternal Wellness Counseling in Boca Raton, and I also work at Relationship Institute of Palm Beach on Worth Avenue. And that's a little bit about me. I'm a trauma expert, among other things, and just really work with the individual. And I mean, working on what is the self and what constitutes what makes each person themselves and what's getting in the way of them being their best self.
I love that. That's an incredibly important skill to teach people of how to get past those little blocks that we all have as human beings and how to learn to kind of embrace that inner best self. So I love that. As always, I like to say to the listeners, I always ask the guest either in advance or once we start the show to introduce themselves, as Essen just did. The whole point of that is to promote more inclusivity. I believe that people feel differently each day, and depending on how you want to introduce yourself that day, well, I always ask the guests to feel welcomed to bring up whatever's important to them today, to introduce themselves, whether it's professionally, personally, however they want to bring it up. It's up to you. I always hate when I do like a public speaking event and they read this bio and I'm like, that doesn't feel like me today. I don't
Yeah,
feel like that person.
that's
So,
I love that that doesn't feel like me today because we're not the same every day, right?
right.
So the core self, right? Internal family systems talks about the core self as being your actual, inherently healthy, knowing part of yourself. But that doesn't mean it's self energy, right? And a lot of people are disconnected from it at certain times and feel different. It depends on what's going on in our lives. It depends on
Mhm.
how we feel that day. It depends on, external variables that we don't foresee oftentimes. Pet gets sick. I know that, there's an ailment in the family. You got in a fight with a friend. It's not about showing up as your best self. I always say the goal is to figure out what is your most authentic self.
Ooh, yeah.
And that looks different each day.
Exactly. And I think the point of this is that it brings that humanity into the conversation of recognizing we're not always going to be perfect. We're not always going to be the best leader. Where some days we're going to have some really bad days and make some big mistakes as a leader, as an employee, as a coworker, a family member, whatever it may be. We're going to make mistakes, and we need to recognize that we have another day, the next day, to really to make up for it, to change, and it just we have to go with the flow sometimes and recognize our own humanity. And
Yeah,
that's
I think it's so important. I think a lot of times we are our own worst critics, right? I always talk about people, everybody has this inner critic. And I watched one of your things, which was like so amazing. You were like this overcompensation for trauma in terms of working, or maybe we're just really hard workers, and I'm like, oh my God, he nailed so many points in that, where I do notice that a lot of people, end up being workaholics as a response to trauma, that where they haven't felt good enough, or they've been invalidated in the past, or within their family system, or there was a rupture in a relationship that was important to them. And that can be when you're younger or when you're older. And then there's this incessant drive that comes up, and it's this proving your worth, and it's happening on a subconscious level, but it looks really good. It looks like you're
Yeah.
ambitious. It looks like you're, but and I say this, I said this before we began, that your body keeps score of everything that you go through, but your body also keeps a tab, and you have an emotional debt to your body. So you burn the candle at both ends in order to subconsciously prove that you're worthy. And then somewhere along the line, you shut down, or you go into dorsal, or you become unhappy, or you
Yeah.
become unfulfilled, or because the dopamine hits that people get when they achieve or they check off a to-do thing, you actually get more dopamine in the pursuit. So oftentimes people will
Hmm.
work towards a goal, whether it's in a corporation, in a company. I know you're working on your PhD right now, which is amazing, because I originally was going to do industrial organizational psychology. That
Oh,
was
no
my,
way. Really?
yep, I applied to two different programs, and I was like choosing between the two. So it's really near and dear to my heart. I think it's an amazing field, and I'm so excited that you're doing it.
It is
But
really cool.
it's so cool. It's so interesting. And the point is that, you know, we have to see what's driving us. Why are we purpose driven, right? And if we're purpose driven, what's underneath that? Why are we doing, what's the why? Why are we doing
Yes.
what we're doing? And people talk about attention deficit. I talk about intention deficit. Are you
Hmm.
doing
What do you
that?
mean?
What I mean by the intention deficit is that I actually look at it in three ways. I say there's a clean why, there's a dirty why, and there's a murky why.
Hmm. Okay.
So the clean why would be, I am doing this, I'm getting this degree because I really want to be of service to people, and change the infrastructure of businesses, or and really make an impact. And I have no other desire whatsoever. But that's not human. We also want to be more educated. So let's say the murky why is, on some level, I want some status. I want a
Sure.
PhD. I want a PhD behind my name. I want, and so then that's like a little bit of a murky why. That's okay. And then the dirty why is like, I have no intention of helping other people. I just really want to make the money and get the PhD, and maybe even get famous, or become, a top in my field. And I don't really care about, what impact I have or helping other
Right.
people. So it's always about the cleaning up. We're always going to kind of be in the murky why, because we're human.
Is this like it's almost like a offshoot of like the ego, the id, and the superego type of like
Yes,
the deeper
yes,
part of it?
yes.
Wow.
Yep, yep.
That's really interesting. No, that's a good point. And I think that, sometimes I guess all three can be true, and sometimes one is more dominant. And I get really just maybe a matter of working your way through towards the more clean why.
Exactly, as close as you can get to it. And it's not wrong if there's a dirty why in there, so-called dirty why, and the goal would be, like, the best example I could give is, I remember when I was young, my best friends had this pond, and we used to walk down to it, and I used to catch tadpoles in a mason jar, one of my like favorite childhood memories. And I would be able to see the tadpoles to be able to catch them. And all of a sudden the pond would get murky, and I couldn't see it. And what I did was, I was trying to shake it and shake it and shake it. And what would happen is that the harder I tried, the more murky it became.
Right.
So if you stay in your passion, and you stay in stillness, in getting more clarity around, I have good intentions here, but I also have a right to want recognition, to want that credential, to be successful, to make money, to support my family. So it's not
Yeah.
about necessarily getting to the clean why. It's just understanding that we all have the clean, the dirty, and the murky. And we kind of
Yes.
the goal is to move farther away from the complete dirty why.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I think that's what I was trying to say, but you said it much more eloquently than I did. And you know what? To be honest with you, and this is it's a I don't want to say it's embarrassing, but it's the reality of the situation is that when I started the master's program for myself, I was feeling very insecure in my career. And the reason I
But that's
started,
normal. That's
well,
normal.
yeah, but the reason I started was is like maybe if I have a master's, I'll feel like I'm enough. and started the journey. I happened to get lucky that the actual degree that I chose, like the major that I chose, was something that really triggered something in me that it ignited a passion. And then now it's
Yeah.
moved towards like, hey, I'm going to get this further education because I really want to see how I can make a difference in this world.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a part of me too that's also excited to be called Dr. Blake. Of
Of
course, that
course.
exists.
Of course.
And I
And
want those
there's no,
credentials.
yeah, and there's no shame around that. And that's that biggest thing. It's like, oh, I should have a clean why. My purpose in mentioning it is just about intentionality.
Yeah.
It's not about, we are purpose-driven human beings. We do want to be recognized. We do want to feel important. We do want to feel valued. We do want to feel included. We do want to feel good enough.
Mhm.
And the tricky part is if you're in constant pursuit, it's like, when will you be good enough? Will you be good enough? But there's things that are help our self-esteem and help our self-confidence. And if I know a little bit more, I feel a little bit more secure and knowledgeable that I'm better equipped to help other people. That's awesome. It's
Right.
not about getting rid of that. It's about understanding it, getting clear about it, having a true intentionality behind. And sometimes you find your cleaner why along the way.
Right.
You may have gone in. So like for me, I was a psych major because I struggled with anxiety in my teen years. And so I was drawn to it as a solution to figure out, what goes on in people's brains. How do and the first psychology class I took, I was super engaged in and I was really interested in it. And I found that I was drawn to it, felt passionate about it, but it was in an attempt to figure myself out.
Did you know that at the time? Did you recognize that you were trying to solve
No,
yourself?
no. A lot of it is in hindsight, right? So I remember just excelling in those courses. I remember I didn't have to study as much. I remember it was imprinting, like it was really sticking in because I recognize that I tune in to something when I'm super interested in it. And there was an automatic tuning in that was happening. And I would automatically tune out when I wasn't interested in something. And Gabor
Mm,
Mate talks about,
yeah.
ADD and talks about that tuning out is a way to sort of check out, to disassociate on some level. And that ADHD and ADD that exists in a lot of us is really a tuning out process because somewhere along the
Yeah.
line there was a rupture or there was some sort of relational wound or and these things don't need to be huge. We have big traumas and little traumas, but chronic misattunements, right? Micro
Hmm.
misattunements over a period of time create a macro misattunement. So if I'm getting invalidated or I'm trying to talk to my father and he's watching TV, it's like, it's not, but in that moment, I could feel like he's not attuned to me. And when I'm younger, in those younger years, the important thing to know is that we are sensing, feeling beings.
Mm.
We are pre-verbal. We're everything that we experience from the womb up until like 3 years old. We cry when are hungry. We reach up for mom or dad to pick us up because we want affection or attention. And so all of these are pre-verbal. So we come into the world as these sensing, feeling beings. And then we learn along the way, we disconnect from the sensory. It's really a sensory odyssey experience, our
Okay.
life, taking in this sensory odyssey experience. And how are we interpreting what we're taking in? And it
Right.
begins, children are all sensing, feeling beings, and they're pre-verbal and they're egocentric, which means they think everything means something about them. But everything shows up sensationally. So if they are misattuned or there's a misattunement going on, they feel that in their body. They don't have words to express that. Then later on, as adults, if we get triggered or we get activated by something, maybe somebody's facial expression or somebody did something, it's an automatic internal scanning that happens in your body that goes, oh, I felt this before. This is a familiar sensation. And when I felt like this, I was scared. When I felt like this, I felt restrictive. I
Mm.
felt, and we don't have words for it, but we just think, oh, I don't like that person.
Right. Okay. So we're associating something that's happening in current time to something that happened in our childhood, but we're not making that connection necessarily unless we do the work.
Yes, to make the subconscious conscious, right?
Okay.
And that was the thing, where I went in a circle, but the psychology, I was subconsciously drawn to it to fix myself. I didn't know that I was trying to figure out, why do I have anxiety? Why am I uncomfortable in my own skin? Why is having a lot of friends and being really good at dancing and being academically strong, why is that not good enough? Why is there an internal unrest inside of me, an internal discomfort? I mean, I remember one of my earliest memories. I think I must have been 7, sitting on the bathroom stall, being like, "Does everybody think like this? Because this is exhausting."
Yeah.
And I didn't know then. It came to me later on when I was doing my work that I was having racing thoughts at 7 years old, and probably intrusive thoughts, and being very worried and being very hyper vigilant, because my neuroception, right, which is our scanning detector that takes in cues of danger and safety at all times, happens in a
Hmm.
millisecond. I decide if you're safe or not within a millisecond of meeting you, which I decided you were safe when I met you. I remember, I mean, not when I met you, but I saw you once at an event that you and Amanda threw with Dr. Aldo Morales when he
Hmm.
was talking about the cannabis. And then I
Yeah.
sat next to you at when Onsite did a dinner,
Right.
and there was an immediate sense of safety I felt with you. You felt familiar to me. You felt warm. But I didn't do that. My internal database scanned and said, he's safe.
That's well, first of all, thank you. I tried to create that, not
Yeah.
intentionally, but I think that by being genuine and authentic and open
And
with people.
I'm drawn to genuine and authentic all day, every day. It feels very familiar to my system because my family was very real.
Now, can I ask you a question though?
Sure.
Could I be threatening to other people? So the genuine and authenticity that I try to bring to conversations, could that be a threat to somebody and also trigger somebody who maybe has a different experience growing up?
Absolutely. If they're used to repressing their emotions because they learned a long time ago, they learned that if they express their emotions and they're real and they're authentic, they're met with disapproval, rejection. Anger's not okay. They weren't allowed to experience their full spectrum of emotions. You, by just being you and trying to create safety and being authentic, are shining a light on them
Hmm.
inadvertently, on their shadow parts, on the parts of themselves that, and they don't even know that it's happening necessarily consciously unless they're
Right.
more consciously aware. But there's, they could be jealous. I wish I could express myself like that. I wish I could be that authentic. I wish I could be like that. But my body won't let me because I'm so scared and I'm so used to repressing my feelings that I'm disembodied. I'm disconnected from my emotionality. And here's this guy, heart on his sleeve, open, genuine, making jokes, concerned about other people, has this sort of infectious energy. And it reminds me of what I can't do, let's say. It
Mm.
reminds me of my
Right.
shadow part I haven't acknowledged, either consciously or subconsciously. So I might
Right.
resent you, and I may use some sort of deactivation tactic, like, oh yeah, I don't know about him, or whatever it is, to try to make myself feel better because you've made me feel bad, not on purpose. I'm not saying me, I'm saying, let's say, a
No,
particular
yeah.
individual. I'm drawn to that. I happen to be, but there's many people that are like, they can't be authentic and vulnerable yet.
Right.
Everybody has the capacity to be that way when they get to work on themselves. And I think seeing that could absolutely trigger somebody. And you could remind them of somebody who took up a lot of space.
Hmm.
You can remind them, again, this is sensory. Your voice, the prosody of your voice, the intonation of your
Right.
voice can remind them. All of this is happening on a sensory level, and it's going around in this internal database. And it's like, they don't know why. So a lot of times people are like, I'm having an adverse experience to you or to this
Yeah.
situation, and I don't know why. And my advice is, tend to what's going on inside. Take a moment, take a step back, maybe take a walk, pause, and tend to the part of you that's getting activated, the part of you
Hmm.
that's getting awakened, the part of you that's
Yeah.
getting triggered or feeling bad, and just tend to it. It gives you that pause.
You make so much sense here. And I'm thinking back on these different times where I think what people have said to me quite a bit is that they say, Blake, you have a calming presence. Being around you feels calming. And maybe it's just I'm not like,
Completely agree with you.
well,
I mean, I
that's
agree with the consensus of that's being told.
well, that's nice. I always feel like a duck on water. But what one time I remember, like I kind of looked at that as it's okay. Like I like to refer to them, it's soft skills, but I refer to them as superpowers, right? So what is my superpowers? Like I bring a calming energy to a conversation,
Yes.
especially in an escalated situation. However, there was one scenario where I was just being myself, calming, normal, just I'm not very rarely am I escalated. And for whatever reason, that energy, the person responded to me by saying, I don't know what it is. You're making me anxious. And I remember going, interesting. Like that is an interesting life lesson to learn there that first of all, we're not for everybody. It's just sort of like
No,
that on a
no.
grand
And
scale.
and it doesn't have anything to do with you and everything to do with the fact that you reminded them subconsciously of somebody. Maybe there was a calming presence in their life that it could be anything. It's so nuanced,
Right.
it could be anything. It could be a calming presence in their lives that they felt also was a calming presence, but invalidated them.
Hmm. Right.
So your presentation was similar to their presentation, yet there was underhanded things going on in terms of the invalidation from that person. And so this exterior in their mind maybe was a facade, or for some reason you're making me anxious. That's happened to me too. And because of the work that I do on myself, I don't sit there and be like, that's a you problem. I'm not, but I'm just kind of like, it was at a trauma training, a professional trauma training. And the goal for somebody in a trauma training who's facilitating a trauma training, in my opinion, is to create a safety container.
Hmm.
And that is a really important thing. Before you do anything, before you begin any work on trauma, before you go in, the safety container needs to be present. And that is the sole responsibility of the person that is guiding it and
Yeah,
somebody else who's
absolutely.
co-facilitating it, right? And what I had noticed, and I was like, Essen, just be a student. Don't try to be a teacher. But I was like, there's no safety container here, like in
Mm.
any capacity. My neuroception was out. I was like, oh, I wouldn't do it that way. I would not, what's going on over there? It seems like a free for all.
Yeah.
And I remember we had to do an assignment and I went to present the assignment and the girl goes, hold on.
Oh.
That was what I was talking about, the adverse reaction. She's like, I'm having a really adverse reaction to you right now. And I don't want it to get in the way of the work that you're presenting because I know it's important. And they were like, and the teacher was like tending to, which I understand. And then another person interjected and was like, I feel like that's really not fair, whatever's going on to her. Like, it's almost like she's ostracizing me. So the one girl
Hmm.
was sticking up for me. And I was like, I kind of knew what was going on and I was like allowing the process. But it was interesting how the teacher was facilitating it in a way where it was like, she's like, I'm not quite sure. I'm really like not liking you. Like, I'm really just not liking you.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, all right, and I wasn't like, that sounds like a you problem. Let me know when you're done with whatever reaction you're having so I can focus on my assignment. I didn't,
As much
I
as you
was,
wanted to, I'm sure.
yeah, because I'm human, because I was like, oh my God,
Right.
like I feel like I'm being compassionate. I feel like I'm being kind. I feel like I'm being conscientious of the people around me. I feel like I'm participating. I feel like I've been very supportive when that particular individual shared about something very, very personal. And then here she is being like, maybe I reminded her of a girl that she grew up with in school.
Hmm.
Maybe I reminded her of somebody else that she had an altercation with or she had a bad experience with. I don't know. I don't know.
Or maybe you're the type of person that they wish they could be and they feel threatened by you, like you said before. those situations are so nuanced and
So
layered.
nuanced. So
My
nuanced.
cohort in school makes fun of me all the time because I constantly bring up layers. I'm like, well, there's layers. Like they ask a question and then they want an answer. And I'm like, I can't give you an answer because there's so many layers to these
So many.
situations. Who knows what's going on there and how to
Absolutely.
address it? It could be the environment, and it can go down so far to figure out what's actually going on there. But I think about with this conversation is, bringing it over to the workplace topic of how important this type of the reaction that people can have to other people, the transference, countertransference, all of this going on, how important it is for leaders and employees and coworkers and in general, just part of the emotional intelligence world here of
Yeah.
understanding this stuff
Yep.
because we have to understand that we're not for everybody, or that somebody may be having a reaction to us. And that also, as we went to in the beginning, not to come full circle, but the
Yeah.
whole introducing ourselves thing, we can't let those moments define us of some, okay, somebody doesn't like me, something must be wrong with me. There
Right.
could be something going on with them that we need to
Yes.
understand and how we actually at work, because typically we're stuck with those people, especially if you're a boss and this is an employee's having a reaction to you, we're typically stuck. We have to find a way to work through this. So how do we shed light on what's actually happening and how, as I guess, a person who is maybe having a reaction and being reacted to, how do those two people work towards mending that so that they can work together?
Yeah. So it's such a common occurrence. And you've said this before because I watch your stuff that,
Thank you.
you talk about
My one fan.
businesses. I'm a fan. And that, a business is a family. It's a pseudo family. We spend a lot of time at work and we interact a lot with our coworkers, with our employees. If we're at the top, it's basically being trauma informed, right? So the more trauma informed you are, the more you're able to not personalize, right? Then the more you're able to de-escalate, the more you're able to recognize I can have a rupture with this person and I can have what I'm noticing is that their reaction feels inappropriate to the context. That's usually a trauma response
Okay.
where something is going on or there's a conversation or somebody comes in hot and heavy with something and they're very reactive. So trauma can be repression of feelings and hiding and not sharing their truth, or it could be the opposite where they're overcompensating and they're total reactivity and
Mhm.
very intense. And then the reaction to a conversation or the reaction to an event that occurs in the system, in the family of the workplace feels inappropriate to the context of what's actually being discussed or what's actually going on is, I would say, it comes from the top down. And it comes from, sitting down. When somebody is activated, you're not going to get very far when two people
Right.
are activated, especially, I do a lot of couples work. Activation versus activation. What happens at that point is this nervous system is, you're just nervous systems now. This
Yeah.
nervous system is reacting to this nervous system, and this nervous system is reacting to this nervous system. And oftentimes a younger part is showing up. It doesn't mean adults don't throw, I don't know what's going on in my throat. I don't, it doesn't mean adults don't throw temper tantrums, but most of the time when an adult has an extreme reactivity, it's a younger part coming up. I
Mm.
know that sounds really odd, but it's a younger part of somebody coming up. They're not even aware of it. They think that it warrants this reaction, or they get upset and have this reaction and they feel bad afterwards. And they come back and they're like, whoa, I think I overreacted, or I think I jumped to conclusions, or I think I created a story, or whatever the case is, depending on the person's emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
awareness, and insight. Some people are pot committed. They're like, nope, this is exactly how I feel. Da, da, da,
Yeah.
da, and
I'm
there's
not
not
backing down.
I'm not backing down. Actually, I'm going to double down.
Right.
I'm going to double down. So I think it's when you're not activated, two people coming back together and understanding what was going on in that person's world What were you experiencing in that moment? I would really like to know,
Hmm.
what were you experiencing in that moment before that happened? Or if you don't know, during or now in hindsight, because sometimes it happens in a millisecond, the reactivity,
Hmm.
right? And so to ask them, I don't know what I was feeling right before. I just got upset and I said what I said. And it's like usually it precedes a feeling, and there's always there's stimulus, what's going on externally, the person, the place, the thing, the situation, and there's a space between my response.
Right.
The stimulus comes in through the sensory experience, through somebody's voice, their conversation. That's why I call it a sensory odyssey experience. We're constantly, it's called exteroception. And it's this sort of taking in of the world around us. What is somebody saying? What am I hearing? Is it safe? Is it unsafe? And then it goes into interoception. So we got exteroception, taking in all the stuff that's going on. And then the interoception is, what does it make feel like in my body,
Right.
right? Internally, sensational wise. And the neuroception is, I'm detecting that it's dangerous, and then the reactivity comes. But all
Right.
this happens so quickly. And so speaking with that person afterwards and saying, I really want to know your world.
Right.
I want to know what's going on in your world. Like, what was it that made you so upset? I really want to know. And here's a beautiful thing: validation. Validation goes a long
Oh
way.
yeah.
Validation doesn't mean you agree with somebody. It means that,
You heard him.
well, yeah, it's like I could completely, okay, so somebody tells you, here's what happened for me, here's what I was feeling, here's what I experienced. And I'm like, based on what you told me, based on everything, you gave me a ride. Like I rode with you on the school bus, and
Right.
I got to see what you were going through. And based on what you just explained to me, it makes sense to me that you would feel that way. I didn't agree. I said
Yes.
it makes sense to me that you would feel that way because you just ran me through how you arrived there.
Yes. This is a piece that I think so many people are missing at work. And again, this is where leadership development is so important. There's certain skills that we need to do our jobs procedurally,
Mhm.
and then there's certain skills that we need to interact with other human beings at work and maintain a level of professionalism. Exactly what you're talking about is what I try to teach people all the
Yeah.
time is that the importance of listening. And if we're focusing, let's just say for the moment, on just leaders here, it's really removing ourself from the conversation for a moment
Hmm.
and our own needs for the moment and trying to understand the person's reactions instead of saying this person doesn't like me, well, I'm not going to like them, and we're going to just going to
Right.
have this contentious relationship
Yeah.
forever and we're never going to address it.
Yeah.
That could even be more triggering. They can come from a house that just never that brushed everything under the rug and never addressed issues. It's much healthier to say, hey, I noticed when I brought something up yesterday, you had a pretty big reaction.
Hmm.
Can you tell me what that was about? Do you know where that came from? Hearing the person, telling them you understand, not necessarily saying you agree, like you said,
Right.
validate.
Validation's
Tell,
not agreeing.
exactly. And telling them that you understand and then asking more questions.
Yes.
Okay, well, we have a job to do. We work together every day. I'm going to see you every day. I don't want to trigger you anymore. I don't want this to happen anymore. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm human. What can I do to make sure that you're happy in this
Yeah.
relationship?
Yeah.
How can we maintain the status quo as we work towards a greater goal? What does that look like? How do we get there? I love that question. How do we get there? Say, hey, we want to do this. This is where we're at, though. How do we get there?
You're saying the word we. How do we get there?
Yeah.
So then you're taking away blaming. Then you're
Hmm.
taking away, and when we're not blaming and we're not focusing on, we're trying to understand. I call that compassionate inquiry. We're trying to understand. When we're in more of a compassionate place and we have more compassionate self inquiry, but also compassionate external inquiry about another person and what they're going through, we move away from
Hmm.
shaming. We move away from blaming. We move away from all of that, and then people's defenses go down. But if you instead pulled away from that person and were like, I want nothing to do with this person because of that reaction, then they have it's reaffirmed to them. See, everybody leaves.
Exactly.
It's the negativity bias that we are all prone to validate and keep alive our story. And if that story is that people always leave me, I'm too much, I'm too, whatever the case is, we just reaffirm that where we have an opportunity. But don't assume we'll do the best that we can. How can we work together to move forward to sort of, have these ways of communicating more effectively and repairing ruptures as they come up, and not saying there won't ever be a rupture, because there probably will. And I probably will inadvertently trigger you at some point without intentionality or harm, and I may hurt you. But knowing that there's an open dialogue between you and me where you can come to me and you can say, explain your world to me and I can validate, then you can go a step further and empathize. And empathizing in this context that I'm talking about it is a little different. It's more like I can imagine. So it's usually followed by, you start with understanding their internal world. They run you through it. Then you say, that makes sense to me that you would feel like that based on that. I could imagine that you might have told yourself a story. I could imagine how hurtful or what that must have done to you. I validated and empathize with, but I didn't agree with. I'm imagining what it would be like if I was in their inner world and they allowed me in. They allowed me through the abyss of their internal world and this journey. And now I'm like, I could imagine how hard that difficult that would be for you to sort of feel that.
And not just saying that, feeling it, like really trying to go there with them and going, okay, I see what you're saying now. That would be hurtful, or that I understand why you would have that reaction. I'd be upset too.
Yes. And what you just described is being an empathetic witness. So now
Okay.
it's like, not only I'm tending to your experience, and I'm being an empathic witness to that experience. And oftentimes people haven't had an empathic witness. They haven't had somebody co-regulate, right? And co-regulation is sort of, when you're talking about having a calming presence, that means that you're a co-regulator to people. That means that your presence or your nervous system relaxes somebody else and makes them feel safe. And so you're co-regulating people. And
Exhausting.
oftentimes people who are dysregulated, and we all get dysregulated, but who are chronically dysregulated, they never had an empathic witness. So we externalize this part of what got activated, right? It's a part that got activated. Okay,
Right.
your wounded part got activated. The trauma part got activated, because trauma really is a wound. Trauma is a wound.
Yeah.
And so it's how we interpreted what happened to us and the imprint that it left on us. And it's like, what's the pain about? Because it's pain, and a wound is a pain. So let's say it's the wounded part. Tending to that wounded part as an empathic witness and just really being with it and seeing and holding the space for that part and being like, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And
What I
that's what
like
you
about,
basically talked about, being an empathic witness.
okay, well, I'm gonna put that on my business card then.
Yes,
Uh,
you should. You're a co-regulating empathic witness.
I love that. It almost sounds like a private detective firm or something,
Totally.
but I detect your
Blake
emotions.
Cohen's co-regulating. What was the second part I said?
Empathic witness.
Co-regulating empathic witness office or headquarters.
I like it. I like
Yeah.
it. I might change the name of the podcast from Workplace Wanderers to
Right?
co copathic. I'm co-regulated. Anyway,
Co-regulating workplace wanderer.
there you go. I like it.
Right?
What I like about what you're saying, not the names, but what I like about what you're saying is that we're not asking people in work to be a therapist. We're not asking them to dive deeper into curing this trauma. We're trying to understand the person that's in front of us, is what I'm hearing you say, and then
Yeah.
working towards a solution. It's not your job as a manager or a boss or a coworker to heal somebody, but it's our
No.
job to understand them so we can work
Yes.
together towards a bigger goal.
Yeah.
Where I see people being hesitant, though, to actually learn this stuff is that they make that mistake, that they think they need to become a therapist. They think they need to understand everybody else and then know how to fix it. When in reality, what we need to do is understand ourselves, let's try to fix ourselves, And then just understand some basic communication skills so that we can get to know other people and understand where they may be coming from, develop that empathy, and then find a solution to move forward.
Oh, you said it absolutely like beautifully. I so there's a danger in wanting to fix and go in and help somebody with their trauma, because what happens with trauma is that without safety and trust, and
Mhm.
without that safety, and even in that moment, even a pocket of safety, like having a pocket of safety. If I'm activated, I don't have access to, I'm not ventral. I'm not in my amygdala is in overdrive. The fear center is being activated, and so now you're trying to come in as a like a paleontologist excavator to sort of, come in and fix my trauma. And it's, and the thing is that can be dangerous, because it's, that takes a lot of work to kind of go in. And I don't want to push people away from working on their trauma, because you should always be working on yourself and the different layers and all of that. But it's not the leadership's jobs to fix the trauma. It would be something like being supportive and even paying for therapy if they were open to it, right?
Right.
Because that's how
Exactly.
much you believe in allowing, a person to be able to work on themselves, that they're not flawed, that this might be helpful if they wanted it. You don't just say, I think you need therapy and I'm going to pay for it.
Right.
It's a conversation that comes a little bit later on when there's more safety and rapport. But you said it beautifully. You said just really kind of getting to know and understand, and here, the thing that you said that was brilliant is that we become, the more we work on ourselves, the more we understand ourselves. When we understand our own triggers, our own activations, our own shadow parts, our own insecurities, our own shame when it gets hit, the more we work on that and we become more seated in self. And what that means is like, I recognize I have all of these parts and I'm working on them. The more I am in self energy as a leader, the more I'm a tuning fork. So you
Mm.
talked about being a tuning fork. You're basically, the best gift that you could give somebody in terms of healing is to be an empathic witness and to be present with that person and be that co-regulating force of nature, and be that tuning fork, because they pick up on what's called emotional resonance. And
Okay.
emotional resonance is that if I'm with you and I see you and I really want to know, and I'm tracking my own nervous system, right? It's about tracking. We're always in a blended nervous system state, right? Polyvagal theory talks about this, that we're in a blended nervous system state. And a regulated nervous system doesn't mean you're zen and you're just like this total chilled out.
Right.
It just means that I am resilient enough to handle whatever adversity is presented to me, and that I'm adaptable, and that I can handle, something I might not like, or a conflict or a rupture, that I'm more resilient and adaptable is what more regulated nervous system looks like. And understanding that we're always going through these blended states.
There's so much to unpack there, and I love everything you
Yeah,
just said. It's, I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head, and I really hope people take the time to educate themselves on this, 'cause it's really important. This is really important work that people have to do. I also think doing the work yourself serves as a great conversation point for when somebody is triggered and you're in their office, or they're in your office, and if they're having these issues of going, hey, I relate to that. I had a struggle that was very similar. This is what I did to overcome it. And you're opening the door for them to say, hey, what did you do? You had therapy? Oh, okay. I don't think it's appropriate really for, unless it becomes a huge problem for leaders to say
right.
like, you need therapy,
Yeah,
just like you said. It's, I agree with you on that, but I do agree with opening the door and going, HR they had some really great recommendations for therapists, and I actually found
yeah,
one and worked through some of the similar stuff that I was going through. I'm not saying that's appropriate for you, but for me, that's what worked, and then seeing where it
absolutely.
goes from there.
No,
But doing,
you're making them feel less alone. And you're
yeah,
also, I call it appropriate disclosure. And it's not like you're going to know exactly when it's appropriate disclosure. But even as a therapist, like when I feel it's of therapeutic value, you know, whenever I don't talk about taking on a client, I talk about taking on a relationship, because these are
Mm,
intimate therapeutic relationships. So it's like, do you have room to
true.
take another client? Do I have room and space and energy and time to be present enough with and add another relationship into my life? That's how I see
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
And so it's it's really important that there is appropriate therapeutic disclosure, where I'm not this blank slate, where I'm not human and I'm in this sort of hierarchical position where I'm the authority. I'm like, I'm still human. I can get it wrong. And
You know what?
I'm sorry. I've had ruptures with my clients where they've gotten disappointed. I've said I was going to send a homework assignment, and it was, and they were really counting on that. And it got sent a day later, and they said, it makes me feel like I can't depend on you. And I said, I completely understand that. I dropped the ball. I am human. And being able to talk about that, part of their work in some of them is to be assertive and speak their truth. I'm so grateful that you're speaking your truth to me and telling me what you need. And I am telling you that, I fell short. I dropped the ball over there, and I will
Hmm.
do much better at it and be more conscientious of it. And so they're like, do you know how nice that feels? This is what I get, that you're not defensive, or you didn't try to stick up for yourself, and you just kind of heard me, and that you don't feel like I'm too much, and you don't
Yeah.
want to like, I'm like, well, what would no, I thought you would not want to see me anymore, or you would, think I'm too much. I'm like, no, I'm impressed by you.
Yeah, exactly. It's something to celebrate when somebody steps forward and says, "Hey, I'm struggling with this," or this bothered me.
Yeah.
So then shutting that person down for expressing how they're feeling, that's where those relationships get fractured and broken, and they start to slowly chip away. And before it's too late, then you can't repair that relationship.
No, then you erode it. And I say we can have rupture and repair as long as we learn how to effectively, and I want you to speak your truth, but
Hmm.
you're learning with me how to effectively rupture and repair. And then this is symptomatic of a larger thing. It's always like that. When you get close with
Right.
somebody and you are close in a setting of a working in a family, which is the workplace, it's a family system. It's a pseudo family system on some level, but you spend a lot of time at work.
Oh yeah.
And so, how do we rupture and repair effectively and be able to? And then we now have the capacity to know, you know what? No matter what, this relationship is still going to be okay. It may evolve and look different over time, but this relationship is always going to be okay because we know how to properly rupture and repair. And I feel heard, and I'm not scared that the person's going to abandon me.
Right. Exactly. The reason I got so excited, by the way, when you brought up the hierarchical part aspect of the relationship is that right before you said that, I was thinking in my head of there's that book Helping by Edgar Sheen, where he talks about like the power differentials in most helping relationships. And really at most interactions that we have is some type of helping relationship, whether it's short term, long term, but having the need to recognize that there is a power differential there and to equalize that power differential before you can move forward. And usually you do that through the use of compassion, of empathy, of self-expression, of vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to say, hey, I screwed up, or take ownership, accountability. That's where you have that opportunity to kind of equalize that power differential. And doing that, though, reminds the person you're in the room with, yes, I am your boss. We're both just human beings. We're both flawed. We both have these emotions. We both
Yeah.
get knocked off kilter when something happens. We
Yes.
have bad days, good days, all of
Yeah.
that. We are human beings. Let's just have a conversation and we can move forward because this is a relationship. I am not here to dominate you and tell you what to do. I'm here to be a partner in your growth and figure out how we hit that freaking goal that we're
It,
trying to hit.
exactly. And I always say, I emphasize, I was like, this is a collaboration. They're like, well, you're the boss. I'm like, I'm not the boss. I said, this is a team effort, right? There's a collaboration. And I want you to feel like this is a collaborative process. I want you to let me know if we're using a modality or there's something that I don't care how evidence-based a modality that I'm trained in is. If it's not the right fit for a client, it's not the right fit for a client. I'm the
Yeah.
first one to say, I'm like, you know what? If it doesn't apply, we're going to let it fly. I said, I do a lot of trauma work with brain spotting, which is basically natural flow EMDR. And so I'll do a lot of that with a lot of my trauma clients. And it's been absolutely like, it's it's what goes beyond talk therapy. It's,
Mm.
there's top down processes, which is cognitive. There's a power in telling your story and having an empathic witness and a
Wow.
co-regulator.
Yeah.
One, but there's also a power in working. And what brain spotting does is it gets right into the subconscious. It gets right into the subcortical part of the brain. And the subcortical part of the brain is right back here. And what happens is all of these memories that were not that pleasant or were painful or were a trauma, which is a wound, they were not integrated and processed into long-term storage. So they remain in this time capsule to be protected, and they're
Right.
connected to your brain stem, which shoots into your body, which is what creates the sensation. And that's why you get activated and triggered. And so what brain spotting does is through eye movement and bilateral music and connection and attunement between me and the client, I'm not the boss. It's
Mhm.
a journey that I'm humbled and honored to be a part of, that I can walk them through this sort of subcortical processing. And the stuff that comes up, we may end up doing brain spotting at like 6 months in, some of my clients 3 months in, depending on the safety. I call it a safety installation resourcing kit. And I try to install that before we begin going in. And so oftentimes it gets quicker than others. I can
Mhm.
usually tell, I usually ask, but the stuff that comes out, the processing that comes out is different than cognitive. There is a beauty and a power in CBT that I'm trained in DBT, in all of those sort of cognitive models, rational behavioral emotive therapy. Albert Ellis, who broke apart from Freud and created his own. He came from psychoanalytic theory as a background, but what he realized is that people were in Freud's chair for years; they weren't getting better.
Right.
And so this is often what happens. They branch off, and he was finding that people were getting better. So there's power in the cognitive. And this is what I say: left brain, which is pragmatic, protocol oriented, is name it to tame it. You want to name it to tame it. Right brain is you want to feel it to heal it. If you're doing both, you're doing top down approach and bottom up approach, you are treating the whole body as a system.
As it should be. That makes total sense. It's like a
Yeah,
dance. I mean, even the brain
it is a
spotting, the way that
total
you do it,
dance.
it's this just feels like a dance that you're doing with the client, which again, that's not really, of course, somebody takes the lead in a dance, but it takes both of you. It takes two
You
to
just said it
tango.
so beautifully. I wrote that in my blog. I called it a dance. Like
Really?
we're just on the same, yeah. Like it's a dance. I call it's a dance between me and the client. It's
Yeah,
connection and
yeah.
attunement. I'm giving sentence stems for deepening. It's the content is coming from them. I don't have an agenda. It's not my agenda. It's the content that comes from them. I'm just helping them process it through. I'm holding it with
Okay.
them.
I love this.
Yeah, it's
You
beautiful.
you are a great therapist because I could talk to you all day.
Oh, thank you.
And similar to a therapy session, though, I do want to limit this to an hour. And
Absolutely.
unfortunately, we've hit that hour. But I feel like there's just so much that people can pull from this. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with so many of so much of this topic. And I really hope people benefit from this. Is there a website, a place that you want to direct people to where they can
Yeah,
find you?
absolutely. So there's a lot more blogs coming up on that. And then I'm actually doing this freebie that I'm going to give. So my social media handle is, I think it's @SMPinarelli _LCSW, where
Mhm.
I do a lot of videos. They're all for informational purposes, and a lot of free guides that I'm going to bring up that people can do some of their own work with. I want
Great.
everyone to get the help. And eternalwellnesscounseling.com is my website.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me
Thank you
today
so
on this.
much.
This is a
Thank you
great
so much.
conversation. I really
It
enjoyed
really
it.
was. It really was.
And to everybody who's listening right now, I hope you enjoyed the episode as well. If you were listening to this on a podcast platform, I ask you to leave 5 stars if you enjoyed it. If you did not enjoy it, just keep moving. I don't need your one
Keep it,
star.
keep it, keep it moving if you didn't like it.
Keep it moving. Shoot me an
Keep it
email with
moving.
some feedback. It might
Yeah,
go to my spam mail. I might leave it there forever, but you can
exactly.
just, send it if you want, if it helps you feel better.
Also tell your friends to leave 5 stars if they like it as well, and then
Yep.
share it, and then have them
Ooh,
share it, and then just, keep sharing.
I appropriate this co-promotion going
Sharing
on
is
right now.
sharing is caring.
If you are watching this on YouTube, do me a favor, like it, comment, hit the thumbs up, comment in the comment section something that you took away from this hour-long conversation. It means a lot to me. I like to know what resonates with other people. So, and I'll make sure that Esten gets that feedback as well.
Yeah. And if they have any questions or want any clarity on something, too.
Awesome. I'll send it your way. Thank you, everybody, for listening.